First, this week's one-on-one in 10 with recreational fishing legend Matt Watson. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Kia ora. Yeah, and thanks for having me. It's anywhere I can get my voice out at the moment, I will gladly take it. Thank you very much.
Amen. Preach. Matt, my mum, my brother, and all my dads love you. You are a fishing legend, a sustainability campaigner, and passionate ocean advocate, and it's a pleasure having you on here tonight. Your beef with Shane Jones has become an important front line between commercial interests and the recreational fishing community. When you first heard that the new Fisheries Amendment Bill would allow commercial fishing to sell undersized catch, what did you think?
I actually thought that it was some kind of a joke. All because, you see, before that point, we'd already looked at the Fisheries Amendment Bill that had actually been released publicly. And there was already some really egregious stuff in there.
Totally.
Like legalising fish dumping, removing penalties for fishermen fishing over quota, a whole number of things that are really murky. And I want to really be really clear here. This wasn't released. There was no press release saying, oh, hey, by the way, we're adding this ridiculous notion that commercial guys should be able to take baby fish before they can breed. That was actually just slipped into the bill. And the bill was released without notification on a Thursday night with the hope they'd be able to read it the next Tuesday. So it's only that we've got a really keenly organised group of keen recreational fishers at Legacy. It's a self-funded group that were literally waiting for it to come out and combing through page by page to find it because it was hidden in there. And we found a whole bunch of other horrible stuff as well. And I believe the minister didn't put that in there because it really spells out how one-sided it is. And the blessing is that we found it and that it's very easy for Kiwis to understand. You know, because it's a real murky business, this fisheries legislation, and it's hard to engage people on it. Well, this has engaged people and it has brought them out, man. I'm so proud of Kiwis letting their voice be heard.
That undersized catch rule has been overturned, but there are many other deeply problematic elements of this Fisheries Amendment Bill. It will allow more destructive bottom trawling. The public will be limited from public consultation on fisheries decisions, and it blocks public access to the footage from cameras on boats. Who is this law being written for? The protection of our fisheries or the interests of commercial fishing?
Well, I think that's pretty obvious. You know, it is unashamedly being put forward by the minister, Shane Jones. He's even used the words like benefiting my friends in the seafood industry. And let's remember, our Minister of Fisheries, not all that long ago, was the board chair of Sea Lords.
Right.
So, it did raise a lot of eyebrows in the recreational fishing community when he was appointed Minister of Fisheries. It's like, can no one see the clear conflict here?
Yeah.
And when you're looking at where the political donors are coming from, the big seafood companies, you're like, surely is there not a conflict here? Well, then when the bill was announced, the minister stood shoulder to shoulder with the CEOs of the big seafood companies. And that is when we, the New Zealand public, found out that this reform was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, New Zealand First did not campaign and say, we are going to rewrite the fishery. They didn't.
That's right.
We've got a list MP who no one gave a mandate to, saying, right, going to his friends in the seafood industry and saying, what do you need? And well, he's done a good job of serving their needs.
Hasn't he?
He has. This will make it easier for them to catch more fish and remove barriers and remove transparency. You mentioned in your intro there the removal of cameras. And there's this notion that's been pushed back by the minister saying, well, no one else have to have cameras in their workplace and we've got to block this because of privacy reasons.
Oh.
Well, people aren't harvesting a public resource when they're in the office.
That's right. That's right.
The New Zealand public have got a right to know how our precious moana is being treated.
Yes.
Because it belongs to us.
And
when we've taken a snapshot at some of that footage, because the current system and this blows people's minds, allows the fishermen to dump fish overboard.
Yes.
And that's perfectly edible, saleable fish. I'm not just talking about the little ones,
Yep.
because they can make an economic decision.
Yes.
Oh, we may not have enough quota for this one. We don't want to pay the fine, whatever. We'll throw it overboard. And so for the quota management system to work, we need to know how much fish is being thrown away.
Exactly.
Because, and we can't know because the camera footage is being blocked, and they said, oh, we're just going to estimate it and we're going to tell you the truth. Well, in the little bit of footage that was sampled, an important species like kingfish was 9 times higher than what was being reported.
Shit.
So the whole system can't work without some real transparent look at that footage. And that is just one of the things that remains in this bill.
Yeah.
And I almost would say it's a bit of a red herring, this undersized snapper thing.
Yes.
You know, they're all coming out saying, oh, look, we're going to get rid of it. Don't worry, nothing to see here. Well, there's plenty to see. And as long as I've got air in my lungs, I'm going to be telling everybody that we've got to keep going because we've already made a difference.
Preach. Public sources suggest that New Zealand First and Shane Jones have received over $100,000 in donations over the last decade from the fishing and commercial industry. Is it problematic for a political party who receives that level of donations from an industry to then legislate in a way that directly benefits that industry?
Of course it's wrong. Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely wrong, particularly when it is a public resource.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. On social media, people have sort of complained about, I mean, how much we pay for fish in New Zealand. And it is ridiculous when we're exporting like kahawai, beautiful fish, being exported for less than $2 a kilo.
Yeah.
Well, Kiwis are paying up to 15 for it. It's and 90% of our fish is being exported. And so people are saying, oh, it's like the price of dairy, you know, it's not on. The difference is farmers actually put inputs into the land. They care for their land. They raise their own cows.
Yes.
And if they do a good job, they'll make more dairy or they'll make more meat.
Sure.
Whereas I say to you, what's the seafood industry doing to grow more fish and make sure there's more there?
Yeah.
And it's a publicly owned resource. So I say the conflict there is huge and it is egregious. And it's been, and when people say, well, prove that he's, I've been challenged to say, well, prove that he's doing it for his mates in the seafood industry. I said, the Fisheries Amendment Bill proves it.
Right.
He wrote it, and he also said it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
The new laws go so far as to rule that anyone who publishes footage from cameras on boats that show environmental damage or breaches of the rules will be fined $50,000. So not only is the public locked out of public consultation, we aren't allowed to see the camera footage, and anyone who publishes footage highlighting abuse by commercial fishing will be fined $50,000. How outrageous is that?
You think of all the serious crimes happening around New Zealand that have got far less penalties against them than that, and that is a really good example of how this legislation, where there's been issues with the way we're harvesting our fish, instead of identifying the issue, saying what can we do about it, and I'm pragmatic as well.
Yep.
There's not overnight fixes on everything.
Sure.
Instead of saying, well, let's just change the law to hide it, or let's change the law to legitimize it. That is what all of these amendments are about. None of them are addressing the real issues, which is we've got a depleted fishery and we're using destructive fishing methods.
Yeah. I've already decided that if this law passes, and if I get sent footage off the cameras showing environmental damage or illegal catch, I most certainly am publishing it, and I'll see Masua Jones in court. Want to be a co-defendant?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I will do is I'll give you $50 to your GoFundMe.
Thank you. That's what we need. That's what we need. Look,
you could end up making a tidy profit.
Many in the recreational fishing community do it to feed the whānau or for the mental health well-being of enjoying being on the water. I've never seen the recreational fishing community as the problem when it comes to overfishing. I've always seen the commercial fishing industry as the problem. Do you feel that the recreational fishing community are held up to a higher standard than the commercial fishing industry is?
Well, already we've got size limits
Yep.
for a start,
Yep.
and even under current laws, they're larger than commercial limits. And now I've always advocated that two wrongs don't never make a right.
Right.
And the individual, I would say to anyone listening, if you go out and gather seafood, just take enough for a feed.
Totally.
Don't take more than you need.
That's right.
Utilize the whole fish. Don't
Yep.
waste any.
Yep.
But what I will say when people call out, oh, I saw this rec guy doing this or that. Yes, that may be true, but recreational and customary gathering amounts to 5% of the fish that come out of our ocean.
Exactly. Exactly.
95% are caught commercially. So yes, while neither side may be perfect, I would say if we want to restore abundance, let's start with the 95%.
Exactly.
And I would never warrant anyone, even if it's a single fish, taking one more than their limit, taking something that they don't need, or just being disrespectful with the fish they catch.
Yeah.
We've all got to have our own accountability, but it's been pitted as a rec versus commercial.
Yes.
It's not.
Yes.
Both can thrive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what underpins all of that is a healthy marine ecosystem. And I think that if all the stakeholders at the beginning of this legislation were invited around the table and to say, look, here's our vision for a sustainable fishing future where we've got a really thriving commercial industry, where some of the control goes back to the actual fishermen
Yes.
as opposed to the big companies, the quota holders. And we've got a thriving recreational fishery and economy. I mean, what's been left out of this whole conversation is because we've been battling all of these fires, is that the recreational fishing economy generates $1.4 billion in economic activity every year for
Right.
taking that 5% of fish.
Right.
So it actually stacks up by volume better than the seafood industry. So that's not been considered. And what definitely hasn't been considered is the things you mentioned, just how good we feel, the
Yeah.
disposition of everyday people, how much they can unload and unwind the stresses of everyday life
Totally.
by going to the source of our kai, grabbing it, and providing fresh, wholesome, healthy food that nourishes the belly, but is really good for the soul too.
Amen.
And that has not been accounted for in any of these decisions.
Finally, Matt, we are seeing climate change impact ocean temperatures with a speed and intensity that is only getting worse. What do you believe that we need to be doing moving forward?
We need to be putting the environment right up there in terms of, particularly something like fisheries, whereas that is the origin of not only all of the economics that comes from it, but also the well-being. And you just, the trouble with a lot of these things is if you follow the money, in this instance with fisheries, a lot of the shareholders, quota owners, they aren't on the water themselves.
Right,
So,
right.
and I think a lot of the commercial fishing operators themselves, the guys that own the boats, but not necessarily the quota,
Yeah.
they're sort of being hung out to dry because
Yes.
they're very visible
Yes.
with their boats. The thing is when you've got the people that are profiting the most, having no real connection with the sea,
Yes.
having no real understanding, they just want a dividend payout.
Yeah.
And then so when they're asking for a dividend payout and the ocean can only produce so much, well then how are you going to do it? You're going to take more fish. Well, we can't take more fish because they're running out. Well, let's take smaller ones.
Yes.
Let's not invest in doing it better in sustainability. Let's invest in the minister.
Yeah. Thank you, comrade. All power to your arm, Matt. Keep your lines tight.
Thanks, mate.
Be well, my friend. Be well.